Okay, the live stream's up and running.
All right, we got a minute.
I don't think we quite have a quorum yet, so.
All right, then we'll hang out. Can you believe how green it got so fast? Like, that's like amazing.
Funny what a little rain
Yes.
does.
I know.
Yeah.
I swear I have this dandelion that grew by my sidewalk that's like about this big. I think it grew there yesterday. I don't, all of a sudden it's just like huge.
All right, Chris, we do have a quorum, but we are missing our judges, our law enforcement with the sheriff and chief.
Correct. Well, I would say we've got a pretty full agenda. So in the interest of time, I think we can get started. We'd call the meeting to order and then, I don't know, Sarah, do you want to just take us through introductions? Calling on people? Do you want me to do that?
I'm letting some folks in. Looks like we've got some more joining us. Yeah, and we've got extra folks on the line that aren't members. Typically, they'd be viewing externally, but so we do have a couple additional people in, but I can certainly introduce people. So I'll just start the top of my screen. We've got County Board Chair Dave Bartlett, myself, Sarah Benedict, Criminal Justice Coordinator. We've got Shelley Jo Metzger, our citizen member, and also Arbor Place employee. We've got Jim Tripp, County Board Judiciary and Law Chair, Supervisor Tripp, that is. We've got Chris Corpola, our Human Services Director and also Chair of our CJCC. We got Katie Shalley, Clerk of Courts. We've got Jamie Kraus, she's the Victim Witness Coordinator. We've got Andrea Nodoff, District Attorney and also Vice Chair of the CJCC. We've got Judge Smeltzer on board there. We also have our County Manager, Paul Miller. We've got Brad Erickson in attendance. We also have Jennifer Lyons with the Bridge in attendance, Coltra Heisted with the Bridge in attendance. We've got support from IT with Krista Vind in the back. We also have Chief Spetz with UW Stout, and then we have Allison Moore, City Attorney for Menominee. So if we do have others that join in, I will just announce them so we can get that on our record. Back to you, Chris.
All right. So included in the notice was the meeting minutes from January 14th. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I so move.
David, second?
Second.
I saw Supervisor Tripp's hand come up. So any discussion about those additions or corrections? Otherwise, all those who in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That would carry. Staff report. Sarah.
All right, thanks. And it looks like we have Chief Atkinson just jumping on the call as well. So staff report. So the 2020 CJCC report was delivered to the county board at their March meeting. That was, there wasn't a presentation, so to speak. It was just the narrative document, but good feedback. It was fairly comprehensive, and members did get a courtesy copy of that. So if you do have any questions, certainly let me know. Let's see, the Wisconsin Counties Association reached out to do an article on our CJCC. So I'll be working with them. Hopefully it'll be in the May edition of the WCA Counties magazine. So be on the lookout for that. They're also going to be profiling the TAD grant and some of the programs out there. Let's see, the Stepping Up initiative has an opportunity for a community of practice. They call it Ready, Set, Measure, and it's really looking at the folks with significant mental illness that come in contact with our criminal justice system. So that can be like CIT, it can be assessment at booking, it can be different diversionary programs. It really spans the whole criminal justice system. We did put in an application to be part of the learning community. So essentially it's no cost. There's just 4 virtual training opportunities to really be part of a larger group with some technical assistance to help look at our data. We've done these in the past, not anything like this. This is very unique in itself, but we found them to be very helpful in helping us navigate how to really look at our data and interpret our data, and that can help drive some decisions as well. So we will keep the group posted on that progress, but I do have commitment with Chris Corpola, Katie Shalley, and Chief Atkinson. So we need 4 people to make it a go. So we've got that anyways, but yeah, more to come once we know more. Next, the CBDG grant that we highlighted at our meeting back in January for housing was approved. So that those funds should start coming through sometime here in April. We're working with our partners with Stepping Stones to really work on some referral processes. But just to remind folks, that was really housing money dedicated to Dunn County for low income and due to COVID. So a sizable chunk of money is coming down, and the folks in the criminal justice system were part of that as far as the need for the funds. So we're looking at really working with our partners to set up a way that if somebody has some housing needs, that they can get connected with that program and get some assistance with emergency housing like at hotels, but then also case management and support finding longer term housing. So housing is certainly a critical issue, and it's one of our priority issues that came out of Stepping Up. So that's really good news to share. And then we did have a spring election, so we've got 2 new judges that'll be coming on board. So I did get a chance to reach out to both of them, since judges are pretty central to what we do here with the CJCC. So just already kind of started that connection. So hopefully we'll get them involved in training opportunities, observing our treatment courts, and just really getting sort of acclimated to the CJCC and all the different activities that we've got going on. So we've got some changes coming up ahead with Judge Smeltzer retiring and some new judges coming on board. but looking forward to that challenge as we move ahead. That's it for my staff report unless there's questions. Okay, back to Chris.
All righty.
It looks like we did have Judge Smeltzer join in. I don't know if anybody, oh, sorry, it was Josie LaLiberty, our child support director, so.
Okay, so our next agenda item is racial equity in the criminal justice system. And by way of introduction to this topic, Sarah and I spent some time, obviously, before these meetings talking about agenda items. And I guess one of the benefits maybe that you can have in terms of chairing the committee is you can look at maybe things that are of interest to you and for further discussion and or action. So today we are going to open a conversation about race and racism and the criminal justice system. And obviously talking about these topics can bring up some really strong emotions. Our hope is for a discussion that emphasizes listening and understanding, deepening our understanding of these issues. Hoping to kind of invite discovery and reiterate our commitment as a community and community leaders to equal treatment of all people who touch our systems. Discrimination based on race is contrary to the values of our nation, but it's also, I believe, contrary to the values of our county. And so oftentimes our culture wants to look at like blame for social problems from an individual lens, like what did that person do to deserve his or her circumstances? And we know that there are complex influences of history and politics and policies and culture and many other factors beyond individual choice that have gotten us to the point where we are as a country today, good, bad, or otherwise. So each community manifests those influences differently. So we'd like to start with 2 short videos which introduce some of the points of view as they relate to race, racism, and criminal justice. They're actually, there's actually, you know, a ton of things out there. So we just tried to pick 2 things that were not maybe particularly, that were someplace that just sort of brought the topics to the forefront. We by no means can capture in these few minutes the depth of discussion necessary to evaluate what is or is not happening in Dunn County. And we propose that we begin a deeper dive into gathering and analyzing some data as it relates to our county specifically. So over the next few months, we'll identify some data points that we believe might give us a better picture of areas of strength and areas in need of improvement. What we do not want to do is go forward assuming that the nationwide discussions that are occurring elsewhere do not apply to us without at least some additional analysis of that. So with that, Sarah can play the videos for us.
Our criminal justice system is really violating our values as a people. We are, as a nation, have this land of the free, this nation that savors liberty and those ideals, really that were lights unto the globe, now incarcerates more human beings than any other nation on the planet.
Like any system, it always needs refining, adjustments, and I think that's where we are now. As far as policing is concerned, I think policing in America has done a very effective job over the last 2 decades because crime is down. Crime is down significantly throughout the country, with some exceptions. And I attribute that to smarter policing, better policing, more effective policing, proactive policing.
Policing is in some sense a victim of its own success in the following sense. And that is that crime rates have plummeted in the last 30 years. At the same time, public support, public trust, public confidence in policing over the same time period has remained flat. The public actually cares a great deal more about how they are treated by public authorities, legal authorities, than they care about the effectiveness of police.
My first experience getting hit with tear gas and rubber bullets was on August the 12th, which really radicalized me in a way to want to pursue reform efforts, not only just in Ferguson, but all throughout St. Louis and the entire country, because, you know, the experience of getting tear gassed and hit with rubber bullets was so unbelievable. You know, I couldn't imagine something like that could happen in modern day America.
If your intention is to, you know, jail massive numbers of people, if you believe that, you know, prison is an effective means of dealing with the myriad social needs of the African American community, then it's pretty effective. Now, I know no one would come out and say something like that. You know, that sounds insane. But in fact, there's a long history in this country of dealing with problems in the African American community through criminal justice system, criminalizing social problems in a way that we don't do in other communities.
There are about 140,000 people in the United States who are serving life without parole sentences. The number of people serving life without parole sentences in Western Europe is 12. These very long sentences that are being served is a very unusual feature of American criminal justice. They serve very little public safety effect.
Really good study shows that we'd have probably 20% less poverty in the United States if we weren't over-incarcerating at the rate that we are, because it has such an impact on people's future earnings when they get out of prison, has an impact on their children, and their overall quality of life for their families. But in addition to all of that, it is disproportionately punishing minorities in this country as well. There's no difference between blacks and whites for using drugs or even dealing drugs, but yet African Americans are about almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for that.
Well, I think our criminal justice system is working as intended. It is only broken to the extent that our society is broken.
For just $67, you
There are tremendous racial disparities in our criminal justice system. The statistics are really startling. In 1954, there were about 100,000 African American men in America's prisons and jails, and today there are almost 900,000. Today, 1 in 3 African American men can expect to go to prison sometime in his lifetime. 1 in 6 Latino males as compared to 1 in 17 white males. So the statistics are stark. And there are many causes for the racial disparities in our criminal justice system. They are myriad and complex. Yes, there is some disproportionate offending for certain types of crimes, but there's also a lot of discretionary decision-making by actors, criminal justice officials in our system, from arrest all the way through sentencing, by police officers, prosecutors, judges, and others. Discretionary decisions that produce racial results, from racial profiling on the part of police officers to charging and plea bargaining decisions by prosecutors to decisions by judges. I don't think that most of these decisions involve intentional discrimination, but oftentimes they involve implicit bias, unconscious biases that individuals have, that we all have in society, that officials in our criminal justice system have. And unfortunately, when they're making decisions about criminal justice issues based on those unconscious biases they aren't even aware of, can have devastating results and produce the kind of racial disparities that I just talked about. There are also a lot of race-neutral factors that prosecutors in particular take into account that can have racial results in our criminal justice system. And I think the key is to sort of figure out through evidence-based studies, you know, what are the decisions that prosecutors are making that are having these unintended racial consequences? Because once we figure out what those are, then prosecutors can use their power and discretion in ways to hopefully eliminate those disparities, or at least to drastically reduce them. I think prosecutors are uniquely situated to fix this problem. And the reason is because prosecutors are the most powerful officials in our criminal justice system, bar none. I think they're more powerful than judges because they make the charging decision and they make the plea bargaining decision. And those decisions are the decisions that really drive our criminal justice system. Yes, police officers have a tremendous amount of power and discretion on the street because they're the individuals who usually have the first contact with individuals when they make a decision about whether to stop a person, whether to arrest a person. But they can only take the person as far as the courthouse door. It's the prosecutor who makes the decision about whether that person should be charged and firmly entrenched in the system. And that charging decision combined with the decision of whether or not to offer a plea bargain, especially in a system where we have so many crimes that have mandatory minimum sentences, those decisions really almost predetermine the outcome in cases.
All right, so just a little flavor. Obviously, it's an area that I personally step into with some trepidation because it can be so have so many deep emotions behind it for people. And I think that in our earlier conversations in our executive committee meeting, we're like, let's not make any assumptions about our starting spot. Let's use some data to tell us, at least to give us a view of where we are as a community and if we see that there are any areas that we need to address or change. So I would just ask if there's any people have any thoughts or things that they believe are important to take into consideration in this next step forward.
I think it's absolutely essential that we take a look at these practices to make sure that we're providing equitable services and having equitable outcomes for people. And I understand it is a sensitive topic. However, I believe we owe it to people as public servants. So I applaud you, Chris, for bringing this forward to the CJCC. And I hope we can move forward with this and try to make a positive difference and reinforce the good things we're doing while adjusting the things that may not have the outcomes that we desire.
Thank you, Eric.
I will reiterate some of what we talked about at the executive committee meeting for CJCC on this topic. And I think at the very least, it is worth looking at our actual data, the actual statistics, what to determine whether or not we do have disparity in our criminal justice system, racial disparity. We all know that our population here in Dunn County is overwhelmingly white. The population of Black and Latino and others is significantly smaller. Does the same bear out in our criminal justice system and in every area from arrests through prosecution and the decisions that are made when a case is prosecuted? I don't know if we have a problem, but I think that at the very least, it is worth demonstrating to everybody our awareness of it and the fact that we took a look at our own history and our own practices to determine whether or not we have an unspoken issue or not.
Well said.
Chris, just another comment that we've done over the years. Sometimes if we can be exposed to educating and even there's some certain testing that could be done, even as us as participants in CJC, it'd be kind of fun to have the training and be able to, you can actually take some screening devices probably to be able to determine whether we actually have biases. And some of us may think we have biases, some may think we don't, but it would be fun to be able to take a hard look at ourselves to see if we actually have some. Because I think when you say self-reporting, am I biased or am I not? I think it's it could leave us all left wanting. So I think when you talk about this type of issue, I think we got to understand ourselves first. And we've all had, different experiences, different journeys, but most of it, in this case, as Paul Miller said, is that, we're mostly a white community. So, and that's how we live. We live like a white community. And so I think we'd probably, one of the first steps in this type of dialogue, one would be to try to identify, is there some training we can participate in? And second, could we assess where we're each at as individuals when you deal with a topic like that? I think it would be interesting. You can send my, evaluation or participation in the mail, okay?
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I shared in the executive committee meeting that one of the people who I have really appreciated his approach to this discussion is a Black man by the name of Bukarta Hayes. He actually lives in city in Minnesota, Mankato, Minnesota. But he grew up in Milwaukee, and he made a statement that's really stuck with me. He said, implicit bias is not necessarily an indication of how you act. It's an indication of how you've been influenced. And I think that's part of what you're getting at, Judge Smeltzer, is that we have been influenced. We've been influenced, if nothing else, by us being kind of in a very homogenous white community. Anyone else?
Shelley Jo shared a link to the Harvard implicit bias test, so I can send that out to the group if they'd like to test their own. But I think that's a great idea, Judge Smeltzer, kind of an activity for us to do.
I've taken that test. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I have taken that test, and it is an excellent measure just to see where you're at. And it really doesn't take very long to do it either. Thank you for sharing that, Shelley Jo.
Right, and there's all sorts of tests out there to not only on racial bias, but gun bias, all sorts of different types of bias. And it can be something more kind of neutral too, just to test your biases. But I think that it's a good idea.
I could almost do a self-admission of bias if you wanted me to and tell you what people could think about it. I actually had a recent Dunn County court case, and it talked about a disturbance. I'll share it with you. It's public record, so it doesn't matter. Decision's been made and that sort of thing. And it was kind of interesting, but then Chief Atkins did say, yeah, my staff has been talking about this case. But here's what's the situation. You've got a disorderly conduct up at Walmart. And I think even Allison's on board, so she can tell me if I shouldn't. But I would say what I came into, they talk about there's an incident involving wearing masks or not wearing masks. And some of us think we should wear masks. Some people think they shouldn't wear masks. But you have a situation going into Walmart, the facility says to enter, you're required to wear a mask, okay? Now, so I won't go into the details, but there was a situation where both individuals got charged. Now, when you talk about a bias on that, and Walmart has a policy to wear masks or not wear masks, and then customers confronted that's not wearing a mask by someone who is wearing a mask, and how it all plays out. But what I'm saying is a bias of wearing a mask or not wearing a mask for me as a judge, was that part of what was going on here? I don't know. But it was interesting how the Walmart, had related on or not, but I'm just saying this one's on me. I mean, I'm just saying when you talk about bias, would that have influenced what I was doing or not doing? But it's just an example that you can have some external force that or something else that's going on that really isn't part maybe of the issue, but yet is there an underlying bias one way or another? And so it's kind of interesting, but what the heck? I share that.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, hearing nothing additional to be continued. So kind of separate but related, partially related note. I believe that we talked in the last meeting about using some of this time together as a CJCC, as a group of community leaders, or now isn't the word influencers? Are we all influencers? To spend some time together collectively looking at maybe some topic, whether it's bringing in a speaker, finding a video information. And so you just wanted to spend just a couple of minutes if people had an area of interest that they would like us to target first, to go out and look for a resource for our next meeting or next few meetings about kind of a topic area related to criminal justice.
Well, I've got one thing, and I'll leave it with you, and I'm trying not to talk too much more. And I apologize for this, but one thing I look at this CJCC experience that we've had, and many of us, like Dave, has been with us for a while. Sarah, you obviously, Andrea, and Chief Atkinson. But here's the thing. I think we've come a long way, and I think we can, be proud of the effort that we have made. But one thing, when you talk about education and how different agencies within a county-wide area, how do we collaborate and actually effectively identify concerns that we should be working on? And how effective is our collaboration? In other words, when we try to collaborate, do we run into barriers that probably limit some of the things that we can accomplish because we haven't we don't fully understand, I guess the concept of collaboration in meeting a goal. We may think we do, maybe we don't. All I'm saying is sometimes I see us, we limited ourselves by our engagement level of commitment and understanding what, trying to have a collective effort to get something done means. And one thing I look at is, even within different departments, are we willing to look at our own activities? Are we willing to share resources or point resources to solve a particular issue? Because a lot of things that we come up with, we don't have resources to solve it. Might be a great idea, but we don't know how to shift resources to kind of accomplish this. And Paul probably, I think he's told us that before. Well, if you want to do it, you can do it as long as you can come up with the resources. But the minute we start looking at each other's budgets, we sometimes we run into a wall. Just a thought.
Eric?
To touch on what the judge had said quick before I offer two suggestions on potential speakers, I agree with what Judge Smeltzer is saying. I think it is difficult with resources. However, as leaders or as Chris said, influencers, it's part of our job to set priorities. And although we may be operating in a certain way for a period of time, or we have certain things that we believe need to be done, sometimes I think we need to really take a look inward to see, are we doing the right things at the right time and setting the right priorities? And as we work together to try to make changes to be more equitable, I think that's where it kind of comes to play, where here's our resources we have available. Are we prioritizing them correctly? And I think if we take a good look at some of the things we're doing, we can probably shift some of those priorities around and do a better job. With that being said, I have two things I would offer for suggestions for potential speakers or topics anyway. Anything on like intercultural competency on communication, I think would be a benefit to all of us, as well as anything related to intercultural development inventory testing that kind of goes along with that implicit bias, but there's a variety of experts and several in our community that could assist us with that as well. So I would offer those two suggestions.
Others? Areas of interest that you have or things you wanted to know more about? I know that one of the things that I might have mentioned is last time, one of the things, but that's been interesting to me or intriguing to me that I know literally tiny bit about is, help me out, Sarah, like pre-chart, like bail setting.
Yeah, the pre-trial stage.
Pre-trial charges and what influence that has on the system, and if just kind of all of that. I know there's a ton of work that's happening out there, but I personally don't know anything about that or little about that. Well, keep your antennas tuned to things that catch your eye or that you see that you might like to know more about, because it is our goal to use some of this time for some of that shared learning, shared opportunity for learning, and for development of a kind of shared knowledge base amongst our group. So with that being said, that leads us nicely into the consideration of actions to be taken by the council. So we have two. The first is a recommendation to conclude the CJCC work groups and advisory groups, and the second is to recommend a recommendation to create a special committee, an operations committee consisting of the executive committee and some other members. So Sarah, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, thanks, Chris. So in your packets, there was a staff report on these action items, kind of explaining some of the background and kind of where we're at with the recommendation. But this really started really looking at our treatment court advisory groups. We have one for family treatment court and one for treatment court, and we're looking at consolidating them into one. But then we really broadened the lens out to look at all of our work groups as far as the activities, the processes, the protocols that are going on. And when we created the structure for the CJCC, the work groups were really designed to be created to work on specific topics. They have a defined purpose, and then they would go away. But in the history, we are good at creating things and not taking things away. So I think there was just one work group that we have kind of discontinued, but the rest have been continuing to move ahead. Plus, we've had a number of initiatives. So as we really examined the utility of our work groups, Chris and I made some recommendations to the executive, and the executive, approved them. And now that's where we're at here with the council. But really looking at the different work groups that we have, for example, data that Katie Shalley leads up. Those are ongoing processes and relationships that we have up and running. So the goal of that group was to develop the relationships, develop the flow of information, and share that information. We've accomplished that. So we're looking at continuing those processes moving forward, but not necessarily in the format of a formal work group of the CJCC. Likewise, communications work group is another example where there was really defined goals up and running, and those processes and practices are continuing. So there's probably less necessity for the work groups to continue to have those ongoing formal meetings. Like I said, the work behind those work groups are going to continue, and the relationships of those work groups are going to continue. But we really are looking at, concluding them formally as a CJCC public meeting that gets posted and agendaed, and really wanting to continue those practices. I think the DEC work group probably has more ongoing activities moving forward that would warrant continuation of a work group. But I think they also agreed that, monthly meetings really aren't necessary. They're up and running. They've got an MOU, and it's really continuing that business relationships on a kind of ongoing basis. I think one of the fears is that, the progress that we've made can be eroded if we don't have a meeting and a formal meeting in minutes. So I think that's something that we need to ensure that we're guarding against, that backward slide. But really for us to move ahead in a way that's nimble and respective of all of our members and meaningful to all of our members, we're really looking at taking away some of those work group meetings and then creating a new operations committee. This idea really came from Chris, but so often the work groups have, we've got principals, leaders attending, but then staff as well. But sometimes we don't have the people at the table for the conversation or that learning or that decision making. So part of the idea with the operations committee is really creating a forum of some key leaders in the system that we can really keep the pulse on ongoing priorities, activities, interrelations with other groups out in the community, that we really, try to focus on the priorities that are important. We've got the players at the table that are decision makers essentially, and can get on board and get their agencies or offices working in tandem with whatever our goal is or priority is. We're looking at the operations committee would be essentially the executive committee plus others. Certainly I think the EBDM work group, that group of individuals, I think would be central to the operations committee. But part of the operations committee is really, we've got certain lenses that we look through, and the evidence-based decision making is one of those lenses that we really want to look at our system through that lens. Likewise, stepping up that initiative to reduce the number of significantly mentally ill folks that are coming to our jail. That's also kind of a lens that we look all across our criminal justice system. So we want to kind of really bring those hats and glasses to our operations committee. Like for example, Katie being that data chair, she would be part of the operations committee. And when we need data, she's, helping us pull that together, or we're reaching back to those work group members, members of all the different agencies represented here that actually do the work and pull the data, but that we're actually pulling it up and we're looking at it at an operations committee level. So it's kind of a new idea. We only have currently one standing committee, and that's the executive committee. So looking at our bylaws, which is also in the packet, we can create another committee in two different ways. One would be a special committee, which doesn't require a bylaw change. And then one would be a standing committee where we actually would have a bylaw change and define the membership, specifically. So this recommendation for action before the CJCC today really looks at us creating a special committee for the operations committee. So no bylaw changes would be necessary. Give us an opportunity to try that method out to see if we're able to really kind of bring our, kind of shore up our momentum and our priorities so we can move ahead in more of a lockstep versus just having a lot of different initiatives going on, and then really never having all the people together at the right place to make those decisions. So Chris, maybe I'll stop there and let you add to what I've already stated, or if there's any questions, I can certainly address them. But I really think we're looking at, kind of doing a shift in, by discontinuing the work groups, formal work groups, activity continues, but creating a new special committee, the operations group, that all members of the CJCC would be invited to attend, just like any other meeting, but that we do have that core group of decision makers that are there at the table, and that we're actually moving these priorities along in a more cohesive fashion. Back to Chris.
So it's a bit self-serving, honestly, to conceptualize it differently, because one of the things that I noticed is that I show up at a lot of meetings with several of you, and I'm trying to help us all to have less meetings. Some of it came out of understanding through the various initiatives that we have launched and the things we've done to look and to see that we have some certain amount of time and energy on all of our behalfs, but certainly on behalf of Sarah and the leadership in the Criminal Justice Coordinating Division. And we, like Sarah said, we're great at starting things, and we're not necessarily great at saying, is this something that we want to continue or not? So I really see it as an opportunity to do a little bit less fragmented meeting for a while and really circle back to look at a core group of individuals who develop sort of a shared language, a shared knowledge base of what's happening within our community, in areas of, as Eric indicated earlier, areas that need focus, need attention, priorities, prioritizing that. And then also just having that group together that has served us. We've been served so well by the groundwork that we've done to be able to work really quickly when opportunities arise and throw grant applications and funding opportunities, go after funding opportunities, and to continue to have the right group of people at the table that can move quickly as we need to. So as Sarah said, there are some cautions. I don't know that we're sure that this will work, but I think from my estimation, it's worth at least a try.
Chris, just in reviewing this, and this one's probably for Sarah, in the operations committee proposal that was pretty good, or put together, on the second page of it, on the top one, it said the proposals for the operation committee to meet monthly and report to the CJCC executive committee and full CJCC. But in our bylaws, the special committees report their information and recommendation to the council. And generally, when you look at our bylaws, the CJ or the executive committee sets the agenda for the council. And I'm just saying there's a little bit of that wording there that's probably a little bit in conflict and not really totally clear. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but I just point that out.
No, that's a good point. And right, so how things have been in the past, because we've had all these different work groups, that information was funneled to the executive, because that's where our kind of that core leadership, some of the core leadership was located. So that's just kind of how we've done business. And then the executive, what comes through there comes to the full council. So right, this proposed special committee actually has all the executive members on there. So we can really skip that step of kind of reporting back to the executive, because they're already included in this work group, and we're really reporting back to the full council.
Other thoughts or comments? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to first bring to conclusion the current work groups. And Sarah has done some legwork and talked to all those chairs to make sure that we are acting in a manner which is congruent with the work that's been done, and honoring that, and that it's okay to bring those to a conclusion. We'll kind of hear a report out in our last few minutes about kind of a conclusion report out on each of those groups. But so looking for a motion to conclude the CJC work groups and advisory groups.
So
Eric?
moved.
I'll
So moved.
second it.
David, any discussion? Otherwise, all those in favor of that action signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, same sign. That motion carries. And then I would entertain a motion to create a special committee, an operations committee consisting of the executive committee and other members.
So
Eric's
moved.
got that.
I second it.
Shelley Jo? Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Motion carries. All right. So these are the final work group reports, I guess. And I don't see Brenna. Maybe Sarah, you can do a little summary of the communications work group.
Yes, so Brenna couldn't join us today, but she did send a summary that I'd like to share with the group. The communications work group was created with the goal of unifying CJCC communications, both internally and externally. Besides streamlining social media messaging between agencies that support the CJCC and its partners, the work group oversaw the creation of a master handbook, the creation and implementation of a CJCC logo, multiple community forums, make the Safe Choice publications, and the 10-year CJCC anniversary video, and the deck training videos, and we have a proxy training video that's in progress currently. So as you can tell, we've accomplished many goals and we still have work to do. So that's the work that we're really talking about continuing, and the relationships that we have built, and we can do that a little bit more nimbly without having the formal work groups. That's Brenna's update.
All right. Data work group, Katie.
Yeah, so the purpose of the work group is to provide guidance in the collection and integration of local criminal justice data consistent with the priorities of CJCC Executive Committee in order to inform policymakers' decisions within Dunn County. We collect law enforcement proxy data, jail statistics each month, treatment court statistics, text messaging statistics for court hearings, which are then compiled on our monthly smashboards or monthly data dashboards. And then we compile them into our yearly smashboards that are presented to the CJCC Council. We've taken on projects as far as costing out disorderly conducts. That's when I first was introduced to the work group. And most recently, we've done quite a bit of research into the OWIs. And anything that really the executive committee wants, we do dive into the data on it and do some further analysis as to if it's working or what's not working in our county. We bring it back out to the executive committee. As Sarah mentioned, we'll keep working as needed, but for the most part, really our workflow is standard each month unless there's another project that needs to come on board with it. So that's my report.
Thank you, Katie. Drug endangered children. Andrea.
Yeah, so this work group started in May of 2017, and its goal is to increase safety of children by ensuring we have an ongoing process that creates just better DEC type of cases. And so one of the biggest components was just to get the group back together. Dunn County had a DEC program some years back. So we updated our MOU and then provided a lot of training to law enforcement, to social workers, and then we branched out to school districts as well as some medical providers. We still have a few things yet to do, but I think the most important piece is just ensuring that people know each other. And that's the relationships that we got out of the work group, I think, has been has been the best part of it. Just so there's kind of a lot of turnover these days with social workers and police officers. And so just getting that face-to-face together, I think has really enhanced our debt cases so far, and we're seeing good things out of it. So I think we will still have to meet at least on a quarterly basis. At least that's our plan moving forward, to ensure that we have that collaboration and we continue to discuss these cases. But a good thing that came out of it is, Chad Mrzinski is one of the lieutenants for the police department who's on it, and through just general talking, Jamie Kraus, our victim witness coordinator, learned that he was a runner, and the PD was doing this run for the Eau Claire Marathon on May 1st. And so our office is now doing it as well, and we're going to show the PD how to get it done. And so it's just kind of brought together some fun relationships that I think will be good for the county. So I hope it continues.
Thank you. EPDM, Jim.
I would like to defer to either the judges or Chief Atkinson. I've got such a limited experience with this. I'd have a tough time summarizing.
Gentlemen, one of you want to take that on, a little summary of the work of that group?
I think Judge Smeltzer should have that honor.
Why would you want me to have it? But I will tell you this, as long as you gave me the floor, I can talk, okay? But evidence-based decision-making is kind of one of those guiding lights that works with CJCC. And that's something, when you talked about EDM being part of this new operations committee that you're talking about, I think you're absolutely right. That at least we've got to be cognizant of where we came from, what we've learned, and our decisions, a lot of them, are they the best decisions that we can make? Do we vet them properly so that we go down a road that we can get the most bang for our effort? And I think that's a lot of what the evidence-based decision-making does, is that, hey, if we're going to start a program and we're going to spend the hours and staff time engaged in carrying out a program, we hope it's one of the better efforts we can put together. And a lot of that can be drawn from, has it been vetted as an evidence-based decision-making process? And Judge Peterson, you can add, put the period on that comment. No, you hit unmute.
Yeah, you caught me off guard there. All right, well, I think that's been something, from the beginning, and I just want to, point out that the reason, well, there are some conditions to us being eligible to have a third branch, to have a new judgeship. And one of those was to have a CJCC, and another one of those is to have a treatment court or problem-solving courts. So those things are very important. And the idea behind that is that there is a strong incentive for the courts to follow, and justice systems to follow evidence-based practices. In other words, practices that have some evidence. There's a sliding or a spectrum of effectiveness. And Sarah's presented on that a few times. From dirt to the gold standard. But there are certain things that do not work, and it may be a big waste of resources if we're doing things that are not supported by evidence-based practices. So I think it's something that we have to have some fidelity to and try to continue. It's been a little bit demoralizing this last year with all sort of the anti-science out there, and it's become political. And I think there's a little bit of that, to some extent in this, but I think we just have to keep, moving on and trying and improving what we do all the time. As Judge Smeltzer would say, you always got to try to improve your game. Up your game. I guess that's it. So thank you.
Thank you, judges. Okay, I will wrap us up here in the last couple of minutes. The Stepping Up work group really came out of the National Association of Counties, who developed a nationwide initiative to look at reducing the number of mental health incarcerations, knowing that people who are incarcerated who have I'm sure you've heard the comment that jails become the largest mental health facilities in the country, in many, many communities, and that people that end up incarcerated who have mental health issues generally do not fare well in incarceration, and they end up staying there longer than their counterparts who commit the same crime, same level of crime or offense. So, so the Stepping Up work group early on did some prevalence, looking into some prevalence data. We don't have great data collection systems across systems, so we had to sort of develop our own homegrown version of looking at that to know that our numbers were consistent or close to those numbers that other entities were experiencing across the country in terms of the number of people who are incarcerated, who are experiencing, who have a significant mental health diagnosis. And then we went to work on, so I think we spent our first year just, again, developing a shared knowledge base, learning what other communities were doing around the country, stealing information when we were stealing new ideas when we were able to do that and implementing them. And that eventually evolved into, most recently, us looking at doing the sequential intercept mapping, which we did last year, and then kind of morphing into two areas of focus, one being additional enhanced crisis resources and the other looking at housing. So I think, again, Sarah's definition of those things as like initiatives versus necessarily the focus of a work group is a good one. And Stepping Up continues to be one of those lenses that we'll look at new programming and to say, does this further the cause of reducing mental health incarcerations? And then the last two are the Family Treatment Court Planning and Oversight Work Group and the Treatment Court Advisory Work Group, which are actually part of the standards for treatment courts, ask that you have an advisory component in each of those courts. The standards for the two types of court, the Family Treatment Court as well as the Adult Treatment Court, look very similar. They're not exactly the same, but they look very similar. And both of them ask that you have some type of larger system input into your courts. But we've struggled with that. We didn't struggle so badly with Family Treatment Court as we were bringing it up and getting it running because there was tons of work to do. But now that it is up and running, it's hard to find ongoing relevance that's not just report out to the advisory committee members. And so I'm excited that there will be a group of people in the operations group that will have enough hands-on knowledge of what's going on in those courts to be able to say, hey, we might want to consider taking a look at X because I don't know that that's working well, or we might want to enhance Y because it's working really well with those in those courts, and that we'll have some people at the table that can take a regular look at those two initiatives and two programs and offer some feedback about them and some suggestions and directions to go. So that is 12 years worth of work. How much? Well, that's not true.
13 this year, I guess.
13 years this year. The last restructure that we did was about 6 years ago, 2015.
Yeah, it was 2014, 2015.
2015, yep. And if you probably have heard me mention this, but there's a lot of work that's been done on the life cycle of an organization, and it's a bell curve. And the way that you keep organizations alive and relevant and growing is to catch it at the top of the curve and start the next curve going. And so I think the organization got started 13 years ago. We hit the top of the curve, and then we did some reworking, and then we've ridden that curve wave for the last 6 years. And it's time to start the next curve. And so I'm excited about that.
Up our game again.
Up our game. Yep, exactly. Get her done. Anything else before we conclude? Our next meeting is July 15th. We will launch our first meeting of our operations committee here shortly. Do we have a date for that, Sarah?
We have a tentative date, but it conflicts with the stepping up, ready, set, measure
Okay.
time. So I'm going to do a doodle, and we're going to get it scheduled yet this month, though.
Okay. Anything else that anyone needs to speak to for the good of the group? Otherwise, thank you for being here. Have a good evening.
Good night, all.
Thanks.